Scented plants evoke memories. They create nostalgia, they can help reduce stress, and they're surprisingly important for wildlife. But a lot of plants today aren't scented. It's Alexandra here from the Middle-Sized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and I'm at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew with Tony Hall, author of Gardening with Scented Plants. Gardening with Scented Plants has over 200 plant profiles, and the plants are grown in temperate gardens all over the world. And the book will tell you exactly how to choose and grow the plants. And there are also useful charts on which plants flower in which months, and also how you can choose scented plants by colour. When I came to Kew Gardens a couple of months ago, the winter garden, which Tony was responsible for, was absolutely looking gorgeous, but it was the scent that drew me in. It was amazing. And so I'm very excited to be back here to talk more about what scent can do in garden design. So Tony, start by telling me why you wrote this book.
There's a few reasons. One, I'm a beekeeper, so I obviously, like to have plants grown in my garden that are good for bees. But also, growing up, I remember how scented plants used to be. But nowadays, plant breeders tend to grow plants more for show, so they're bigger, more colourful, bigger range of colours, some pest and disease. But there are fewer and fewer plants bred nowadays that are fragrant plants, and plants that I can remember from my childhood. So it was really around that, to have a garden full of scented plants is amazing. I mean, it is lovely to have flowers that last longer, but the way the plant breeders have bred a lot of the plants now, they've kind of lost the scent for the longevity of the plant. So it was really to show people the wide range of plants all year round that you could have in your garden that are just wonderfully scented.
So how would you plan a scented garden if you were designing for scent? Because obviously you don't actually need every plant to be scented, do you?
Yeah, if you had a scented garden, that would be just full of only scented plants, and there would be quite a lot of conflict, I would think, between all the different fragrances, and it might be completely overpowering. So I think the thing is you need to have a mixed garden, so a mixture of everything, annuals, bulbs, shrubs, perennial flowers, and have kind of mixed borders or mixed shrub borders where you just put certain plants in, whether they be dot plants, like Philadelphia, which will flower in April, May, and then it's gone, and then it can be followed by lots of other plants. I mean, there is a vast array of different ones. But I think the thing is not to have everything scented. You need to have a bit of a mixture.
And presumably also to have the scent where you will be passing it. So maybe outside the back door, near the seating area, on the edges of borders, things like that. Things like that.
I mean, things like, at your back door as you go out in the garden, if you have a climbing plant on the wall, could be a wisteria or a rose or a jasmine, something like that. Something that's really nice and scented. In patio gardens, you need to have things close to where you're going to be sitting or working. You mentioned along pathways where, perhaps you've got things like catmints or lavenders and rosemary, things that you can brush against and let the scent out. Because it's not just flowers, it's also, the foliage where the scent comes from.
So if we go through the plants, say season by season, and start, of course, with winter, which you might think there are no scented plants, but the winter garden that you created here at Kew was just amazing.
Yeah.
And it did envelop. It was absolutely in the air, the scent. So what were the plants that you planted there and that you would recommend for people in their gardens?
I think winter is a great time. I mean, a lot of gardeners, whether they're professional or amateur gardeners or just, weekend gardeners, think winter's a time to put away your tools and, shut the garden down. But it's actually a time not only for colour, but a wonderful time for fragrance. The plants that produce their fragrance in the winter have to work twice as hard as those that do in the summer, because there's much fewer pollinators around, so they're putting out more scent to draw in more pollinators. So the air is completely filled. Things like Chimonanthus, winter sweet, is a wonderful one. Some of the sweet box is another good scented plant, all the hamamelis, lots of viburnums, different types of viburnums, lots of different scents. There's a wonderful one called Edgeworthia, the paperbark bush, which has almost like small pom-pom clusters of long tubed flowers that just have so much scent. You can smell them easily from 10, 15 yards away, and the air is completely full. So there is so much. Winter is definitely not a time not to be gardening.
And so now look at some recommendations you can make for, say, 4 or 5 really good spring plants that people might use for fragrance?
There's bulbs like Lily of the Valley. Convallaria is a very good one if you have a shady area in a woodland type setting. Lilacs are a great one. Again, lilacs were a plant that have gone out of fashion slightly, and some of the newer bred ones have less scent, but they're a great cottage garden plant for spring, early summer. Pave white narcissus is a brilliant one, and the nice thing about those, they will actually start flowering in November, and they will flower right the way through Christmas, and they will flower right through into April. They're a great cut flower. You know, they'll fill a bunch of those will fill a room with scent.
And in terms of summer flowering plants, when I was looking at the charts that you have in gardening with scented plants,
Yeah.
it was amazing. You know, there was a few dozen in most months, and then we got into June, July, and August, and it was literally hundreds of plants that are scented that flower then. But would you be able to pick out, say, 3 that you could really recommend anyone to have in their garden?
I think lilies, the giant lilies, the regal lily is definitely one. I mean, that's one. Again, it makes a really good cut flower. Heavily scented. There is one downside with that. The pollen is quite staining, so you have to make sure that you don't get the pollen on your clothes. I mean, roses, I mean, everybody knows. I mean, you could probably almost have a rose that will flower from spring right through till autumn. And there's just such a wide variety of different fragrances through the roses. All the jasmines, you know, so the star jasmine, which is Trachlyspermum, and the common jasmine, which is Jasmine officinale. Both those are super fragrant. And again, they're a plant that you can grow up a wall, over a fence, over a pergola. So even in a small garden, you know, if you're limited to space, they're a really good one. They'll even grow in a pot.
And then when we get into autumn, what would you say, 3 or 4 really good scented plants?
My favourite plant for the autumn is one called Clerodendron. I think it's called, the common name is something like the Harlequin glory flower. It has sweetly scented flowers that are, I mean, they're exquisite. The scent from them is absolutely exquisite, and it absolutely fills the air around. And also, if you crush the leaves, they smell of peanut butter. So it's quite an unusual one. Not a flower, but Cercis siliquastrum, the leaves on that, as it goes into autumn, you can, it's a really good one for people walking around and they can smell like a candy floss smell in the air, but there's no flowers at all. And it is literally just the leaves of the Cercis going into autumn.
What about sun and shade?
There is a choice for either. Most fragrant plants do best in the sun. Full sun is the best. The fragrance that flowers give off comes from the petals, and flowers have this ability to know exactly what type of insect they're performing to, if you like. So obviously the night scented flowers will flower in the evening for the moths, but the summer flowering ones in full sun will produce most of their fragrance almost around midday. So they know when most insects are out. So generally full sun for most, but there are quite a few. I mean, if you think of some of the woodlandy type plants, things like skimmias, things like some of the winter plants we spoke about earlier, they will take partial shade. There isn't much that will take full shade that's really good for scent. A lot of the climbers will take partial shade, you know, as long as it gets some sun through the day, that's absolutely fine.
Do scented plants need any special care or soil?
Not really. I mean, it depends. I mean, if you're growing things like lilacs, I mean, they like an alkaline soil, and so do daphnes, which is the winter flowering one. So, and rhododendrons like acid soils. So as long as you're picking plants for your soil type, whether it be acid or whether it be alkaline, then there isn't any special need for them, no.
And you mentioned the night flowering one. What would be a couple of good night flowering plants?
I mean, there are some in their names that are an absolute giveaway. You've got night scented stock, night scented phlox, evening primrose. So that's 3 straight away. The jasmines again would be very good. The tobacco plants very good. So yeah, they're the kind of plants that you do want to have close to an area where you're sitting and enjoying a warm summer's evening.
What about scented flowers in pots? Is there anything we need to know about it? Is it just like growing any other plants in pots?
It's more or less like growing any other plants. I mean, if you're going to have a shrub, for instance, in a container, it needs to have a good loam-based compost. Probably one of the John is number 2 or number 3. Roses would do very well in pots, but because they're quite a deep-rooted plant, they kind of need quite a decent-sized pot, maybe 75 centimetres, something like that. So I think as long as you've got the right soil conditions, you can grow almost any plant in a pot within reason. You can grow climbers in pots, annuals in pots. obviously lots of bedding plants. Petunias are scented, they can grow in pots, lavenders. I think the thing is, the nice thing about growing things in pots, if you only have a patio or a very small garden, not a lot of soil, obviously you can grow them in pots, but you can also move them around. Obviously not if they're in huge pots and you've got biggest plants in, but even things like magnolias, Magnolia stellata, which is a wonderful late spring flowering plant, slightly scented, very, very pretty, and they do very well in pots. You do actually get plants now they sell as patio plants, but again, because a lot of these plants are bred to be kept smaller, they don't always have the same amount of scent. So stick to the plants you know that have a good scent and grow them in your containers. If you're buying a plant in a garden centre, the easy thing is to give it a sniff. If there's no scent, don't buy it.
Some people are worried that scented plants might attract more wasps.
Wasps are not really pollinators. They're not like bees, moths and butterflies, which are the main pollinifiers, and so are hoverflies actually. Wasps mainly live on insects, other insects and spiders, which they feed their larvae. So they actually do drink some nectar themselves for energy. They're not visiting the flowers for the scent. They're visiting just because there may be insects there, which they're going to take back to their nest, or they're there just to have a little drink of nectar. They're not attracted to scented plants in any way.
Yeah.
They'll go to any plant and every plant. Yeah.
And in terms of hay fever, if someone's a hay fever sufferer, can they plant scented plants? Is that any correlation?
I'm a hay fever sufferer. I've gardened all my life. No, I don't think so. You know, we spoke earlier about how much scent the plants put around the outside of the plant, so you don't need to stick your head into a plant to sniff it. So no, I couldn't have a garden without scented plants in.
I'll put a link in the description below to Tony's book, Gardening with Scented Plants, and also to the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew. And if you're interested in more plants that are good for cottage gardens, then don't miss this video coming up next. 25 best cottage garden plants. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.